Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, whichever the case may be for you out there. This is Bishop Bryan on a brand new edition of Vestiges of Christianity. I thank you all for joining me here today for a discussion on Purgatory, Limbo, and ghosts. We are going to, from an esoteric Christian perspective, break down each of these theological components. And at the end of this show, I would like to believe that you will come away with a much enhanced and greater understanding of what these conditions are. And I use that word conditions very carefully because that is essentially what they are in truth. This and more today on Vestiges of Christianity. Stay tuned. Well, thank you all again on this November 12th, 2015. Again, I'm Bryan, your host and Bishop of the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church. I've been absent for about a week and a half. I apologize for not having an episode last week and being a little bit late this week. I did have an exorcism that needed to take place this past week, and every time we are in a position where we need to perform, or I should say a client's spiritual situation in their home is so severe that an exorcism is required, we tend to sometimes encounter some challenges to that. We do get attacked. Again, if we take the proper precautions, there's never usually a lasting consequence, although there can be. It's dangerous work. There's no question about that. And we can, do the best that we can to assure that we come away unscathed. But there's always going to be something, particularly for the exorcist. Not so much for the participants, although it can sometimes happen. But for the exorcist, a life of being attacked by demonic forces is just par for the course. And so this past week, I've been a little bit under the weather after that exorcism. It was a pretty intense one, not one I was prepared for, I should say. We actually went back to complete a spiritual resolution for a client and found that there were cursed objects in the house that needed to be cleansed and destroyed. And so that is ultimately what ended up happening. The couple of days after, I awoke with extreme leg pain, and what ended up happening was I somehow tore or severely damaged my hamstring in my right leg, which has made walking almost impossible until I finally got some muscle relaxers to take care of that. And so now things are finally starting to go back to normal. But this is, again, the types of things that occur in exorcism ministry. And so I apologize for not being well enough to bring to you an episode last week, but as I said, this ministry, the exorcism ministry is more important than the teaching ministry. And so when there is a conflict between the two, I yield to the exorcism ministry because that's what really helps people to get out of these horrible situations that they can find themselves in this terribly secularized world where Satan and demons are marginalized down to mentally ill perspectives. Even spirituality today is pretty much being accused of being nothing more than just a mental illness. So that's the world we live in. And one of these days I'll do an episode on the dangers and the experiences of exorcism ministry. Is really quite interesting. And if you live in the Atlanta area and would like to assist our ministry, we'd love to hear from you. Just go to our website at esotericchristian.org and look for the Order of Exorcists link, and you can apply to become an investigator with us. If you feel you have a calling or vocation to actual exorcism ministry as a cleric, remember, in the Catholic tradition, only priests or bishops can perform exorcisms. They are not done by the laity, and they are not done by deacons. Deacons are assistants. They are not to be performing exorcisms themselves. And so if you want to become an exorcist, you would have to also have a vocation to priesthood, according to the sacred priesthood. And the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church has opened up the vocational policy. So if you live in the Atlanta area, or you're planning on living in the Atlanta area for an extended, indefinite period of time, and you would be able to service the ministry here in Atlanta, Georgia, and you feel that you have a calling to this type of priesthood, then I would love to hear from you, because we need as much help as we can get. And we are severely understaffed in the Order of Exorcists. There's more cases than exorcists to resolve them. And some locations don't even have a cleric on board. Some of them are strictly just investigators. And there's very limited things that investigators can do if they encounter a demonic event. So esoteric, just go to Nicholean.org. Will take you to it, the original site. And you can also go to esotericcatholic.org. That's esotericcatholic.org. And you will see at the top menu an option for Order of Exorcists. And you can read more about our work there. That is what the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church primarily spends its time on. Also, if I'm having sound issues, please if any of you are listening live, let me know. Because let me know on Facebook, or leave a comment on the post so that I know, or send out a tweet. Let me know that there's sound problems. Hopefully we have resolved them. I'm hoping that we have. All right, so let's get into this subject tonight, and that is Purgatory, Limbo, and ghosts, which is ironically quite related to the work of exorcism ministry. And you're going to understand what I mean by that in just a moment here. When we are investigating a potential demonic infestation or obsession, or even a full-blown possession, we are always trying to ascertain the causation. And there are some challenges to that because of different worldviews within the Christian theology. There are a lot of churches, unfortunately, that teach that there is no such thing as a ghost or a haunting. They teach that anything that would present itself as a supernatural being is got to be a demon. If it's not of God, it's of Satan. That's unfortunately a common perspective here in the United States. For people who do understand that the realm of the demonic is quite real, they tend to always assume that everything supernatural that is not of God is automatically of the devil. Even in the Roman Catholic Church, we see this thinking. It frustrates me to no end when I am talking to a Roman Catholic and they tell me, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts." Okay, well, you don't believe in ghosts. So, that doesn't make everything that is a haunting demonic. Your belief is not intrinsic to the reality of the spiritual life. So even if you don't want to accept something, doesn't make it not true. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind when we are dealing with these touchy subjects, because people today, and it's a frustrating part of my job as a bishop, it's a very frustrating part of ministry in the modern world, is that people think that discernment means if it doesn't feel right to you, then you don't have to believe it. And I would go as far as to say, I don't care what you believe. There is a reality out there that if you choose to explore it and observe it and pay attention to it, it will reveal itself to you. You won't need to believe in it. You will experience it. And then you will have the wisdom that you need in order to understand it better. So I am going to ask you, all of you, who are going to find some of the things that I'm going to say today to be disturbing, to rather than dismiss me as being, oh, well, I don't believe a word that bishop's saying. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Instead of taking that point of view, I'm going to ask you to at least pay attention to the fact that I have done this work for a long time. I'd like to think I know a little bit of something about it. And unless you have been on an actual demonic investigation where you have experienced firsthand demonic infestation, demonic obsession, demonic oppression, demonic possession, or classic hauntings, poltergeist activity, unless you have experienced this firsthand for many, many years, I'm going to ask you to go out on a limb and trust somebody who does this professionally. So I'd like to think that I could shed some light on the subject, even if you think I am wrong. Because I am drawing the information that I'm going to share with you today from first-hand personal experience, combined with my understanding of Catholic theology, and combined with my extensive experience in ministry, as well as work in psychology and clinical work that I have done prior to becoming a priest. Okay, so that's all I ask. Don't dismiss what I'm about to say. Everyone is going to have a problem with some of it. I guarantee you, no matter what perspective you're coming from. If you are a Christian, I guarantee you every denomination is going to have a problem with one of the things, at least one of the things I'm about to say. I also want to remind everyone that this is an esoteric Catholic church, which means, and I've said this before, but for new listeners, I'm going to repeat it. So for my regular listeners, I ask you to bear with me. We are not bound by strict conventional theology, doctrine, and dogma. As an independent, fully autocephalous tradition in the Catholic Church, we have the freedom to explore things that the Church would dismiss theologically. One of those things is the nature of what happens to us after we die. People tend to stop at what the Church has said about this, and when things fall out of vogue, when modernity sets in and people start saying, well, we don't need to believe in that anymore, that's an antiquated notion, then the Church starts to revise its opinions. We've seen this with Limbo. And Limbo and Purgatory are very different conditions. And yes, they both exist. I do not agree with modern Roman Catholic opinion that Limbo was just some antiquated medieval position that we would rather forget we ever talked about. No, Limbo is definitely a absolute reality, and as you explore the theology of ancient Judaism, it becomes more clear as to what it really is, and we can break that down. So we're going to spend the next half hour breaking these things down. Okay? And then we're going to give some esoteric positions that are going to be a challenge for all of you Christians out there, because you're not going to like them. I guarantee you're not going to like it. But I ask you to at least put some faith in my experience. Okay? Because I actually do know what I'm talking about most of the time. All right. Okay. Let's start off with purgatory. Okay, that's the big one. Now, a lot of Protestants don't like this. They don't like the term. They don't like the idea of it. They tend to take this position where you have one life, and in that life you have to make a choice whether to accept Jesus Christ or not. If you don't, you go to hell. If you do, you go to heaven. Simple as that. But for Roman Catholics, it is not that easy, and that's because we actually maintain, as Catholics, an older theology that is closer to what the Desert Fathers taught, the doctors of the Church, all of the people that a lot of Protestants forget about. They forget that there was a theology before the Reformation in the 1500s. They forget about that. They think it's okay to dismiss those things. And their pastors teach that it's okay to dismiss those things. In fact, their pastors don't even teach those things. But, I mean, if you're going to practice a religion, do you not want to at least spend a little bit of time paying attention to what the earliest Christians taught and thought about? Wouldn't you want to know those things? Those writings are preserved. They're not canon. They're not scripture. But those writings are preserved. What early Christians thought about, taught, what the early church accepted as truth, the tradition of the church, holy tradition, is all preserved there. And so purgatory is an absolute condition, something that is sort of a middle-of-the-ground state of things for those who pass on, who are not quite perfect enough to enter into the kingdom of heaven, but are certainly not evil enough to warrant eternal damnation in hell. Purgatory, therefore, becomes a third condition. It is known in traditional, conventional Catholic theology as a purification. It purifies the soul for refinement so that it will be able to enter into the kingdom of God. Remember, nothing can enter into the kingdom of God that is not perfect. And very few of us are going to die in a state of perfection. I can guarantee you that. Most of us will sin all the way up to our last breath. That is just the nature of the human species. That is part of human depravity. And so purgatory becomes actually a hope. It's a great hope to know that when you die, God is not finished with you yet. So even if you're not perfect enough to enter into the kingdom of heaven, there is a condition there that allows for you to have another opportunity to purify yourself. Okay? That's important. So that's what purgatory is. We get it from some of the apocryphal texts where they are canon in the Catholic Bible, in the Orthodox Bible, but Protestants have removed them, and so therefore they don't think they're bound by what they teach. But we can clearly see in Maccabees and a few other sources that are non-biblical that it was just taken for granted that prayers for the dead were something that we needed to do. When people die, we should pray for them. We should pray for their salvation. And that becomes the foundation to a funeral mass. That's the whole point of having a funeral. That's the whole point of Christian burial, is so that we can help that soul to find salvation. And think about it. Why would the ancient Jews have taught that we should pray for the dead? Because if they're in heaven, they don't need our prayers. And if they're in hell, our prayers can't help them. So that, by default, creates this third condition of purgatory. Okay? Now, limbo comes along as another thing altogether. And what limbo was the idea that what happens, church, doctors of the church and various philosophers of the church and theologians wanted to conclude what happens to a baby who dies that never got baptized, because in ancient Christian religion, baptism is essential for salvation. We had problems with the broadcast on baptism, so that I think you can understand mostly what I'm saying on that previous episode, but it was very garbled because of the sound issues. So, but if you were able to get through it and listen to it, despite the sound problems, you would have learned in that the grace of baptism is in the sacrament. That is where Christ makes his salvation open to you. That's how you receive Christ. That's what makes you capable of receiving the salvation of Christ. There is also another erroneous theology that is being taught in Protestant and emergent Christian circles, evangelical circles, that that Jesus' death on the cross is it. That you don't really need to do anything. He died for all, and by default you automatically get this grace. Well, no, it does not work that way. You have to accept Jesus into your life. You need to accept that grace of salvation. Yes, he did it for all, but you have to still go out there and accept that grace. And that's done by two things. One, by the sacrament of baptism, the essential grace of salvation, and by perpetual purification of oneself by avoiding sin, and when one falls into sin, taking recourse for the forgiveness of sins by the sacrament of reconciliation, which restores us to the perfection that we received at baptism, because at baptism all of our sins are forgiven. When we sin after baptism, reconciliation, the sacrament of confession, is the means by which the grace of purification is received, so that we can be restored to that baptismal state of perfection. If we were to die at that moment, it would be immediate entrance into the kingdom of heaven. As long as that grace is active in our life, and as long as we are pure enough to enter into the kingdom of heaven, it is available. Now, this is what Christianity has always taught. It was only after the Reformation did these things start to break down. And we see it in the writings of the Christians going back to 100 AD. Okay? So this is Christianity, folks. I know it's difficult for people that are in different denominations to accept some of these things, but this is Christianity. This is ancient Christianity. And this is what real Christianity was when it started out. It's changed a lot. And a lot of what has taken place post-Reformation has not been to its advantage, even though it seems like it has. Okay? So limbo is this condition. It's not a place of purification like purgatory. It is simply a state of perpetual non-existence. Okay? Now, you're going to say, well, Bishop Bryan, where's your theological justification for this? Because even the Roman Catholic Church is moving away from the doctrine of limbo, and you're going to bring back this antiquated notion? I know there's people out there thinking that, okay, who are listening to this broadcast. And I want to make clear, there's not enough time to go into every theological explanation for these things, but I'm going to give you the basics of what you need to know. And when you look at the ancient Jewish faith, okay, when you look at the Judaism of Jesus' time and earlier than that, what we have in Judaism is this notion of Sheol, the abode of the dead. And even in this Nicene Creed, we get the theology of Jesus descending into hell, it says, descending into the realm of the dead, where he goes to free those who died before the crucifixion. So he's not only there to save us today, but he's also saving people retroactively. And where were they? They were in Sheol. When we say that Jesus descended to the dead or descended into hell, we're not talking about hell in the eternal damnation sense. We're talking about this state of Sheol, which was sort of like this half asleep, barely awake, barely conscious condition. This is what the ancient Jews saw to be the afterlife. It wasn't very pleasant, and it was very much based upon very much integrated into the same notions that we had in the pagan worldview at the time with Hades. Again, people were not naturally preserved into this state of perfection, which is something that we started to see as a development with Plato. Prior to that, what we had was Hades and Sheol, which were these places of semi-non-existence. You're barely there. You just kind of go, into this state of eternal sleep, not awake, not aware of what's going on. And in some cases, you basically just slowly decompose. The spirit just slowly breaks down. We even have that notion in the East. A great example of it is Yomi in Shintoism, where, when you die, you enter into Yomi, which is, again, like a Sheol state, where you just slowly decompose until the spirit breaks down and everything that you were is no longer there. So it's basically a slow progression towards non-existence. And that is what the church has always taught, is what happens to the unbaptized. Even if you were a great person, you would end up in limbo. And in some cases, this is really just for babies, because babies haven't really committed any sins of their own, but they still have the original sin that has contaminated their nature. And so therefore they're not perfect enough to enter into heaven. They're not evil enough to go to hell. They're not saved, so they can't go to purgatory. Limbo becomes a fourth condition. Now, a lot of people don't like this. They're like, what kind of benevolent, loving God would send someone to limbo? Well, he doesn't send people to limbo. He has given us the grace of salvation, but we have to save it. And we are responsible for each other, not just for ourselves. Okay, so I can't tell you with any certainty whether or not all unbaptized babies go into limbo, but I would say that from what we have been able to mystically observe in our work, monastic work, as well as my experience with dealing with those that have passed on, I would say that in most cases, limbo is the condition that will most likely occur for most individuals who have not taken the grace of God seriously, that have not understood the sacramental graces. Purgatory is closed for the most part to those who have not engaged the grace. Purgatory is a grace, and by grace we mean a gift given to us by God, a spiritual gift, a supernatural gift that gives us the ability to move us into a condition of salvation. I am going to disagree with any Catholic, Orthodox, or Christian who would argue with me that anything not of God is of the devil. This is simply not true. In fact, most of the cosmos is neutral, just like a weapon is neutral. I can take a knife from my kitchen and I can prepare you one of the most wonderful meals you've ever tasted. I'm a fairly good cook. I'm not afraid to say that. And yes, cooking requires a knife. I could also take that knife and cut your throat with it. Does that make the knife evil because I can cut your throat with it? Of course not. Does it make the knife really good because I can prepare you a wonderful meal with it? Of course not. A knife is simply just a knife. What intent we put into it determines what we get out of it. And so, when we're dealing with the notion of a ghost, in most cases what we are dealing with is neutral energy. Now, for those Catholics who say, oh, well, the church has never taught anything about ghosts and hauntings, well, guess what? Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine actually do in their writings talk about ghosts and hauntings. St. Thomas Aquinas actually does give us an understanding that the souls of the dead can appear to us, always under the will of God. And sometimes they do this for encouragement, always with the permission of God. These would be souls that are in heaven, that God allows to manifest to us so that we can experience them and know that they have not left us. But then there's hauntings. And hauntings can be disturbing to people. And so what do we do with the notion of a malevolent spirit? Well, Thomas Aquinas also gives us an understanding that there's two reasons that they would be permitted to manifest or even haunt a house. And that is, number one, they're asking for your prayers, which in our secularized world is becoming less and less of a thing. Not only do we have various Protestant churches teaching that we shouldn't even do this, they even teach it as some kind of form of necromancy, which is absolutely ridiculous. But even Roman Catholics and Orthodox are not spending the time praying for the dead as they should, because we can impart some of the grace that we've received in our baptism to those who have died and have lost their way. We might be able to save some of them through that grace. We can give them some of the grace of Christ through us. Remember, only Christ actually does the salvation. But some of these operations that we can perform is how that grace is dispersed, is conferred upon an individual. So our prayers are so essential to the dead that sometimes when they need them, why there's a haunting is because nobody's praying for them. And so we can come in, and I do this often in the order of exorcists. When I come in and I find that it is traditional haunting where there's a distressed spirit there that is not a demon, I will go in and actually perform a rite of Christian burial, or I will say a funeral mass, and I'll have as many of my team members participate in it as possible so that we can pray for those souls and help them to move on. And then the second condition that Thomas Aquinas gives us is that sometimes they are allowed to appear for a warning. Sometimes it's a warning in the very sense of not too different than what we see in A Christmas Carol with Scrooge, where Jacob Marley appears to give Scrooge a warning about his own salvation. Sometimes the dead are allowed to manifest for this reason. But there is one thing that Thomas Aquinas reminds us of, and that is if in a haunting situation there is harm being done to the living. And I'm not talking psychological harm, because any kind of haunting can be psychologically stressful. I'm talking physical harm, where people are being scratched, attacked, physically being made ill. That is always caused by demonic forces. Sometimes if there is a malevolent spirit or a distressed spirit in a house, that can attract demonic forces. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have both going on. And it's sometimes hard to tell which is which, because a distressed or malevolent spirit can very much behave like a demon. And because they behave that way, it draws in other actual demons. And so now you've got a demonic event and a traditional classic haunting. And yes, this happens. This happens. So how does this occur? Well, we have to get into metaphysics in order to really understand this. And then we have to take it one step further to understand esoteric Christianity. Because I will be completely frank and honest, the conventional Christian world does not have a theology to answer these questions. Only within esoteric mystical observation have we been able to finally start to extrapolate what's really going on after death. And so here's where I'm going to become extremely controversial. And I don't have a whole lot of time here in which to do it. I've got about 7 minutes. So arm yourself, brace for impact, because I know a lot of people are not going to like this. Here's what I've been able to extrapolate from my mystical observations, because I have spent a great deal of time trying to discern what occurs immediately after death. And here's what we have found. The A being is made up of three components: a body, a spirit, and a soul. And in the Christian worldview, sometimes spirit and soul is getting mixed up, but they're two completely different things. The body is the physical form that we see before us, right? That's what we think is our outward manifestation. And then inside, we feel that there's a spirit, but it's not actually inside. Believe it or not, your body is a misnomer. It's not a body. The spirit is a body. What you call your body is actually inside your spirit. Your spirit surrounds you. That's what we would say in some metaphysical or New Age circles that look for auras and whatnot, or see auras. That's what the aura is. Okay, that is the spirit. It surrounds the body on the outside, not on the inside. There's nothing on the inside. Now, your soul is not inside you. Your soul animates you. That's what gives you life. So if your body is your corporeal physical self, your spirit is your non-corporeal, non-physical self, and then the soul is the energy, the divine energy that animates it and gives both life to the body and to the spirit. So when you die, your body decomposes. The decomposition process starts almost immediately. And then your spirit starts to is basically released, is no longer confined to where the body is, although for a period of time, usually 3 days, it will stay with the body, which is why it's important for the body to be left alone for at least 3 days. No autopsies, no cremations. It's very distressing to a recently deceased person to be violated, to watch their body be violated in that way. So you should be left alone for 3 days minimum when you die, to give the spirit a chance to break the connection and the attachment to that body. And then at that point, there is no longer consciousness as we know it, because the brain is dead. So all that remains as far as the awareness factor is that the spirit preserves an instinct. If that spirit was a good person, their instinct will be good. If that spirit was a very sinful or evil person, then that instinct will be evil. And if they were wronged, if they were murdered, or if they died unexpectedly, that can create attachments where the last instinct is trauma. And that can keep them locked in and what would become a classic haunting. Now, eventually, the spirit will deteriorate. It will break down and decompose just like the body does, but only at a slower rate. And that state is limbo. That is what limbo is. The soul, however, is the only eternal quality. That does not break down. That does not deteriorate. That does not decompose. The soul is the only thing that is able to enter into a state of purgatory. Wow. And there's not a whole lot of time to really talk about where we're going with this. So it sounds like we're going to have a part 2. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to stop here. And next week, hopefully on Tuesday, we can resume our normal time. But next week, I'm going to pick up where I left off here, because I think there's a lot more that needs to be said. I thought I could get it all done today, but 45 minutes doesn't give me a whole lot of time. So next week, we will pick up from this point. I will then discuss esoterically what it means. What is this condition of purgatory, and what exactly is the soul? Because if the body deteriorates and rots and becomes nothing, and the spirit does essentially the same thing, only at a slower rate, then what is this eternal soul? And how does it end up in purgatory? How does it go into a permanent state in the perfection of the kingdom of heaven? This is where we're going to discuss the metaphysics of it, high-level esotericism. It's not for everybody, and I apologize if it disturbs you, but I think when you get to the end of the next episode, it will all make better sense to you, because I'm also, incidentally, and I'll give you a little preview, I'm going to incidentally next time talk about what reincarnation is. Because think about this. The church has never really been open with the idea of reincarnation. There has some theologies. We know that even Origen implied very early Christian writers imply that reincarnation was something that they were dealing with. And certainly there's billions of people in the East that believe in reincarnation. But in the West, we tend to see things as we get one life and that's it. What if I told you, though, that both are true? What if I told you that what Buddhists and Hindus are teaching about reincarnation is just as true as what Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are teaching, that you have one life and it goes on to the afterlife? What if I told you both are true? The only way to understand that is that we are not one thing. Nothing is one thing. So next time I'm also going to introduce you to the Buddhist concept of dependent origination. And that is the idea that everything is the sum of constituent parts. Some of those parts break down and get recycled. Some of those parts move on to a state of eternal bliss. You are not one thing. You think of yourself as one thing, but you're not. And I can prove it biologically. You're not one cell. You're not one organism. Your entire existence is the combination of millions of organisms. Little cells, from your neurons all the way down to your white blood cells that keep you free of disease. You are made up of nothing but cells. And those things are made up of nothing but molecules. And those molecules are made up of nothing but atoms, which is the substance of all things. You are the sum of a constituent part. And that is it. I know that's difficult for a lot of people to accept. But it will all make sense, I promise, next week when we continue this subject further. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank all of you who have friended us on Facebook. The Holy Nicholean Catholic Church Facebook page is almost at 900 likes. We really thank you for that. And please, if you appreciate this show, if you find value in the things that we talk about on this show, if you find value in the work that the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church does in its exorcism ministry, helping people who have no other recourse, who have spiritual problems in their life and no one to help them except people like us. If you believe in this work, please donate to it. Go to esotericcatholic.org and give us a donation, please. Also, go to our Facebook page and you'll see that I have a seminarian in Uganda that I need to get out here to the United States so that he can assist us with this work. And we need resources to do that. We've had a lot of budget problems in the church. There's never enough money to take care of everything. And I hate asking for donations. I hate soliciting them, but I don't know what else to do. If you can give, please give. If everybody who likes us on Facebook gave $2, we will have met our goal. If everyone who liked us on Facebook did that. Okay? Please, give what you can. We appreciate your support. Until next time, this is Bishop Bryan Willett saying goodbye.